What started as one of the most explosive and entertaining fights of 2025 at UFC Noche quickly descended into one of the most shocking displays of unsportsmanlike conduct we've witnessed in recent memory. I'm Duke, and tonight we're breaking down the controversy that has the entire MMA world talking. Silva's cowardly sucker punch to Diego Lopes after already being brutally knocked out. This isn't just about poor sportsmanship. This is about crossing a line that could end a career faster than any knockout ever could. Let me paint the picture for you. September 13th, 2025, Frostbank Center in San Antonio, Texas, UFC Noche was delivering everything fans could ask for: Brazilian talent, explosive finishes, and a main event that had genuine bad blood brewing for months. Diego Lopes versus Silva wasn't just another featherweight bout. This was personal. The trash talk had been vicious, the press conferences heated, and both men made it clear they genuinely couldn't stand each other. What we got was a war that lived up to every bit of hype, followed by an incident that nobody saw coming. The fight itself was an absolute masterpiece of violence and technique. Silva, known as Lord, came in riding a perfect 5-0 UFC record with 5 finishes and 3 performance bonuses. This guy was the real deal, explosive, creative, and seemingly unstoppable. Diego Lopes, on the other hand, was looking to bounce back from his title shot loss to Alexander Volkanovski. At 26-7, Lopes had everything to prove and nothing to lose. The Brazilian-born, Mexico-based fighter was determined to show that his championship opportunity wasn't a fluke. From the opening bell, both men came to prove a point. Silva opened with his trademark creativity, attempting spinning techniques and unorthodox angles. But Lopes was ready. When Silva threw a spinning kick midway through the first round, Lopes capitalized with perfect timing, securing a takedown that would define the round. What followed was pure domination. Lopes moved to mount position and began raining down elbows that immediately opened cuts on Silva's face. For nearly 2 minutes, it was a one-sided beatdown that had Silva's corner screaming instructions, while their fighter absorbed punishment that would have finished lesser men. The resilience Silva showed was remarkable. He absorbed those elbows, weathered the storm, and somehow exploded back to his feet. Just when it looked like he might be done, Silva connected with a front kick to Lopes' chin that reminded everyone why he was undefeated in the UFC. The crowd erupted, and suddenly we had a real fight on our hands again. That's the beautiful brutality of MMA. Momentum can shift in a heartbeat. Drop a comment below if you think Silva's pre-fight trash talk came back to haunt him. And make sure to subscribe to stay updated on all the fallout from this controversy. The second round told a completely different story. Silva found his range and began connecting with clean combinations, mixing body shots with head strikes while keeping Lopes guessing. His confidence was building, and you could see him starting to believe he could turn this fight around. Lopes, to his credit, was firing back with everything he had. Both men were landing significant shots, and the Frostbank Center was absolutely electric. This was MMA at its finest, 2 elite athletes pushing each other to their absolute limits. But then, with less than a minute remaining in the round, the tide turned definitively. Silva threw a hard right hand that missed its mark, leaving him slightly off balance. Lopes saw the opening, secured a body lock, lifted Silva, and slammed him to the canvas. Silva bounced back up immediately, his fighting spirit still burning bright, and began throwing bombs in close quarters. The crowd was on its feet as both men engaged in a firefight that had "Fight of the Night" written all over it. That's when Diego Lopes delivered one of the most spectacular finishes you'll ever see. As Silva pressed forward throwing combinations, Lopes stepped back, spun, and unleashed a spinning elbow that connected flush with Silva's temple. The sound echoed through the arena, that sickening thud that tells you the fight is over before the fighter even hits the ground. Silva crumpled immediately, his legs betraying him as he tried desperately to grab the cage and stay upright. The referee was on him instantly, waving off the fight as Silva's cornermen rushed into the octagon. It was a beautiful, brutal ending to a fight that had delivered everything promised and more. Lopes had just earned himself a spectacular comeback victory and likely secured his path back to another title shot. Silva, despite the loss, had shown incredible heart and given the fans their money's worth. Both men would earn Fight of the Night bonuses, with Lopes also picking up an additional Performance of the Night award. It should have been a perfect ending to a perfect fight. But that's when everything went sideways. The celebration and respect that should follow great fights was nowhere to be found. Instead, we witnessed something that has no place in professional mixed martial arts. Lopes, still high on adrenaline from his spectacular finish, approached Silva's corner. Now, this isn't uncommon. Fighters often exchange words with opposing corners after heated rivalries. According to Lopes, members of Silva's team had been particularly disrespectful during fight week, and he wanted to address it directly. Here's where the story gets murky, and frankly, where it doesn't matter what was said or who started what verbally. Lopes was near Silva's corner, having what appeared to be a heated but not physical confrontation with members of the Fighting Nerds team. He then turned and began walking away, his back completely turned to Silva, who was still sitting on the octagon floor where he had been knocked out just moments before. What happened next will likely define Gene Silva's career and potentially end his time in the UFC. Silva, still dazed from the knockout, still bleeding from the first-round elbows, somehow found it in himself to stand up and deliver a deliberate punch to the back of Lopes' head. Not a push, not a shove in the heat of the moment, a calculated strike to an opponent who had already beaten him and was walking away. The reaction was immediate and visceral. Lopes spun around in shock and confusion, clearly not expecting to be attacked from behind after the fight had already been decided. UFC security rushed in to separate the fighters, while Silva's own cornermen, led by coach Pablo Sucupira, immediately began restraining their fighter and clearly expressing their disapproval of his actions. You could see the disappointment and anger on Sucupira's face as he physically held Silva back and appeared to be giving him a serious talking to. This is where we need to talk about precedent. Because what Silva did isn't just unsportsmanlike, it's potentially career-ending. Remember Paul Daley? Back in 2010, after losing a decision to Josh Koscheck at UFC 113, Daley threw a punch at Koscheck after the final bell. Dana White didn't hesitate. Daley was immediately cut from the UFC and has never been allowed back. That punch didn't even land cleanly, and it happened during the fight. Not minutes after it had ended. Stay tuned because the best analysis is still coming. And you won't want to miss how this could reshape both fighters' careers. Hit that subscribe button now. What Silva did was arguably worse. This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment reaction during a fight. This was a calculated attack on an opponent who had already won, was walking away, and posed no threat. The optics are terrible, the precedent is clear, and the MMA community's reaction has been swift and overwhelmingly negative. Social media exploded with comparisons to the Daley incident, with many calling for Silva to receive the same punishment. A permanent ban from the UFC, Lopes handled the situation about as well as anyone could expect. In his post-fight interview, he addressed the incident directly. After the knockout, Gene gave me a punch to the back of the head. I asked, what happened? I said, I don't know. After that, this guy tried to be nice to me. I can't understand it. Are you trying to be my friend? Go to your side. This guy gave me a punch to the head, to the back of the head. I think that's not cool. The confusion and hurt in Lopes' voice was evident. He had just delivered the performance of his career, secured a spectacular knockout victory, and was immediately forced to deal with being sucker punched by someone who should have been congratulating him or at least accepting defeat with dignity. Instead of celebrating one of the best finishes of the year, Lopes found himself trying to process why his opponent would attack him from behind. Silva's own reaction in the immediate aftermath was telling. After his cornermen restrained him and security separated the fighters, Silva appeared to try to approach Lopes again, this time seemingly to apologize or make amends. But the damage was done. You don't get to sucker punch someone and then play the good guy card afterward. The MMA world saw what happened, and social media was already lighting up with outrage. The broader implications of this incident extend far beyond just these two fighters. The UFC has worked incredibly hard to legitimize mixed martial arts as a professional sport, moving away from the human cockfighting perception that plagued its early years. Incidents like this threaten to undo decades of progress and give ammunition to critics who still view MMA as barbaric or unregulated. Dana White and the UFC brass take this stuff seriously, and they should. The organization has strict conduct policies, and attacking an opponent after a fight violates every principle of sportsmanship that the UFC tries to promote. When fighters step into the octagon, they're representing not just themselves and their teams, but the entire sport of mixed martial arts. Within 24 hours of the incident, Silva took to social media to address what happened, posting on his Instagram story with his face still showing the damage from the fight, cuts, swelling, and bruises that told the story of the war he had just endured. Silva attempted to take responsibility for his actions. "Unfortunately, yesterday emotion got the better of me," he admitted. "I was doing well in the second round there and ended up going all out wanting to trade hands. I ended up playing alone, I wasn't connected to my team, so this responsibility for this defeat is all mine. But here's the thing, Silva's statement focused primarily on his performance in the fight, not on the post-fight attack that has everyone talking." While he acknowledged that emotion got the better of him, he didn't directly apologize for punching Lopes from behind or show any real understanding of how serious his actions were. It felt like damage control rather than genuine remorse. The timing of Silva's statement was also problematic. Rather than immediately addressing the incident and showing contrition, he waited until the social media backlash was in full swing. By then, the narrative was already set. Silva was being portrayed as a sore loser who couldn't accept defeat gracefully. His delayed response only reinforced that perception. What makes this situation even more tragic is that Silva had just been part of one of the best fights of the year. Despite losing, he had shown incredible heart and skill, proving that he belonged among the featherweight elite. The fight was immediately awarded Fight of the Night honors, with both men earning $50,000 bonuses. Silva's performance, even in defeat, should have enhanced his reputation and set up bigger fights in the future. Instead, one moment of poor judgment has potentially derailed everything he had worked to build. The MMA community isn't just disappointed, they're angry. Fighters, analysts, and fans have been quick to condemn Silva's actions, with many calling for severe punishment from the UFC. The comparison to Paul Daley is unavoidable and damning. Daley was coming off a decision loss where he felt he had been wronged by what he perceived as Koshek's dirty tactics and the judges' scoring. There was at least some context, however misguided, for his moment of rage. Silva, by contrast, had just been legitimately beaten by a superior opponent who knocked him out clean. There was no controversy, no disputed calls, no reason to feel wronged beyond the simple fact that he had lost a fight. Looking at this from a technical standpoint, Silva's performance before the incident was actually quite impressive. He showed excellent recovery ability after taking tremendous damage in the first round. His striking in the second round was sharp and effective, and he was finding success with his combinations before walking into that devastating spinning elbow. A loss to a fighter of Lopes' caliber shouldn't have been career-damaging, especially given the exciting nature of the fight, but now, instead of analyzing Silva's technical improvements or discussing potential matchups for his next fight, we're forced to discuss whether he should be allowed to compete in the UFC at all. That's the cruel irony of this situation. Silva's best performance in the octagon is being overshadowed by his worst moment outside of it. The featherweight division is one of the most competitive in the UFC, and Silva had established himself as a legitimate threat to the top contenders. His creative striking style and finishing ability made him an exciting prospect for fans and a dangerous opponent for anyone in the rankings. Now, all of that is in jeopardy because of 15 seconds of poor decision-making. From Lopes' perspective, this incident could actually work in his favor in terms of public perception and career momentum. He delivered a spectacular knockout against a previously undefeated UFC fighter, handled the post-fight drama with class and professionalism, and emerged as the clear good guy in the narrative. His call-out for another title shot now carries even more weight, as he's shown he can handle adversity both inside and outside the octagon. The UFC finds itself in a difficult position. Silva is a talented fighter who brings excitement and finishing ability, qualities the organization values highly. But the precedent set with Paul Daley suggests that post-fight attacks on opponents are grounds for immediate termination. The UFC cannot be seen as applying different standards based on a fighter's talent level or entertainment value. There's also the international aspect to consider. Both fighters are Brazilian, and this incident reflects poorly on one of the UFC's most important markets. Brazilian MMA has a rich tradition of respect and sportsmanship. From legends like Anderson Silva and Jose Aldo to current stars like Charles Oliveira and Amanda Nunes, Jean, Silva's actions go against everything that Brazilian martial arts culture represents. The reaction from the Brazilian MMA community has been particularly harsh. Many prominent fighters and coaches have publicly criticized Silva's behavior, emphasizing that such actions have no place in the sport. The fact that his own cornermen immediately restrained him and appeared to reprimand him shows that even his closest supporters knew he had crossed a line. What's particularly frustrating about this Situation is how avoidable it was. Silva had just been in an incredible fight that showcased his skills and heart. Even though he lost, he had earned respect and likely set himself up for another big opportunity in the featherweight division. All he had to do was accept the loss with dignity, congratulate his opponent, and begin planning his comeback. Instead, 15 seconds of poor judgment may have cost him everything. The broader MMA community is watching closely to see how the UFC responds. Will they follow the daily precedent and cut Silva immediately? Will they impose a suspension and fine? Or will they take a different approach entirely? The decision will send a message about what kind of behavior the organization is willing to tolerate from its athletes. For Diego Lopes, this victory does more than just bounce him back from his title shot loss. It positions him as one of the most exciting and marketable fighters in the featherweight division. His knockout was spectacular, his handling of the post-fight incident was professional, and his call-out for another title opportunity seems entirely justified. The UFC would be wise to fast-track him back into title contention while his stock is at an all-time high. The technical aspects of Lopes' victory shouldn't be overlooked in all the post-fight drama. That spinning elbow was perfectly timed and delivered with maximum impact. It's the kind of highlight reel finish that defines careers and gets shown in promotional videos for years to come. The fact that it came after absorbing significant punishment in a back-and-forth war makes it even more impressive. Silva's striking before the finish was also noteworthy. He had found his range in the second round and was landing clean shots on a high-level opponent. His body work was particularly effective, and he was starting to break down Lopes' defense. Unfortunately, one poorly timed offensive exchange led to his downfall, and his reaction to that downfall may have ended his UFC career. The psychological aspect of this incident cannot be ignored. Fighting at the highest level requires incredible mental strength and emotional control. The ability to handle both victory and defeat with grace is part of what separates professional athletes from everyone else. Silva's failure in this regard raises questions about his mental readiness for the pressures of UFC competition. What happens next will likely depend on several factors: the UFC's desire to maintain consistent standards, the severity of any potential legal issues, and Silva's willingness to take genuine responsibility for his actions. If he's serious about salvaging his career, he needs to do more than post a brief social media statement. He needs to publicly apologize to Lopes, acknowledge the severity of his actions, and demonstrate that he understands why what he did was wrong. The UFC has built its reputation on providing a platform for the world's best mixed martial artists to compete at the highest level. Part of that responsibility includes ensuring that athletes represent the sport with professionalism and respect. When fighters fail to meet those standards, the organization must be willing to take decisive action, regardless of talent level or entertainment value. This incident serves as a reminder that being a professional athlete involves more than just physical skills. Mental discipline, emotional control, and sportsmanship are equally important. Silva possessed the physical tools to succeed at the UFC level, but his mental approach ultimately let him down when it mattered most. As we wrap up this analysis, the question remains, what should happen to Jean Silva? Should he follow in Paul Daley's footsteps and receive a permanent ban from the UFC? Should he be given a chance to redeem himself with a suspension and mandatory counseling? Or should the organization take an entirely different approach? What's your take on this controversy? Do you think Silva deserves a second chance? Or should the UFC make an example of him like they did with Paul Daley? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear where you stand on this. Should fighters who attack opponents after fights be permanently banned? Or is there room for redemption in cases like this? Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell because this story is far from over, and you won't want to miss any updates on how the UFC handles one of the most shocking post-fight incidents in recent memory.